Good morning, everybody. This is Nycos Newsday. I'm your host, Jonathan Albin, and I have with me two fine guests, both Marianne and Melkor from the Strangers in the Strange Land on-site game that we run at Board Games Paradise are here today with me. And our topical discussion is going to be on the merits of parents and children. I know this is going to sound crazy, playing together. It's I know it's a nuts thing to even suggest in today's world, but we're going to talk about the merits and the benefits of having parents and children play together. And Melkor himself is a prime example of that, and Marianne's going to be enthusiastically adding her 2 bits as a school teacher with God, I don't even remember how you told me once how many years you had at the head of the class. How many years did you teach, Gene?
37.
37 years. Okay, so I've been a game master longer than you've been a school teacher. That's fascinating to me because uh, Gene has a slight advantage over me
Yay.
chronologically. See how I said that? I was very nice. I didn't bring up a young lady's age or anything. So, and Melkor has been role play gaming with his daughter. Well, you've been playing games with Natalia. How many years?
With her, we started around 3 or 4 years old.
Oh yeah, what did you play
Uh, oh,
first?
we started with just your traditional Walmart games, your big box store games.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a gamer since the 80s. You
Mm-hmm.
can see all back there.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Yep.
I've noticed that the big box store games have the IPs, the cute factor, the colorful pictures,
Yep.
and then we from there it just escalated quite rapidly.
So why don't you relate your particular, I guess you'd almost call it a testimony, to how you got started role playing with Natalia here in Nikos.
Well, it was very weird that all of a sudden she picked up RPGs because it tends to be you might have to watch my the way I describe it, but it seems to be a highly niche game for specific people.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed over the many years the groups tend to be most in general little different people. And then you have your normal people, as I would say. I hate to describe it that way.
It's hard to
And they,
hard to quantify, what a role player is. That's true.
yeah, it's all over the place. And I've noticed a lot of people usually have groups and they've been locked down for. And by lockdown, I mean they've already got their 5 or 6 players. They have no room for more. They don't click, and I get that. And I get that. My daughter, for some reason, at the local store, they were doing kids stuff, kids gaming.
Mm-hmm.
He joined one real quick on one of those nightly games,
Mm-hmm.
and to my surprise, she got hooked very quickly. I'd have to give praise to the dungeon master, to the person running it. Let's just say
Mm-hmm.
she has done others with other people running games,
Mm-hmm.
and I've noticed people running the games are not all the same, obviously.
Well, no.
Uh,
Th-
but the first one just kind of clicked, and it's like with anything. If your first experience is good, everything is good. If your first experience is bad, it's just hard to bring that customer back, that hobbyist back.
right. Right.
She got hooked. I've been honestly, I've dabbed on it over the years since basically like you, since D&D 1, since
Mm-hmm.
I've been around.
Mm-hmm.
I just never. That's just never been a group. It's just hard to find a group, to be
Right.
honest.
Right.
So if
Right.
you can find a store, somebody willing to run games, I've noticed the person running the games, it's a lot of work.
Well, yeah, I was looking in particular to have you relate how you got started with us because
With
Natalia.
you, that's what we're getting at.
Okay.
So slowly, at some point, the store, you know what? I don't even recall. At some point, we decided to just join another group that weeknight worked for us,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's you. Basically, I brought her in, and this is where this topic is gonna start. I was the guy in the back, just like with other games where I didn't want to participate because I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. You sit back for 3 or 4 hours. After a while, you open your mouth. It wasn't hard for me to do because I've been around the hobby for a long time, so it wasn't like very weird.
Mm-hmm.
And there we go. And I got in. He got in.
Well,
And
she had been playing with us for about what, 3 months or 4 months before you crossed that line.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and,
I've
and
noticed. I've noticed. Yes, it's been a few months before I crossed the line. I have noticed. Like it goes back to I think if you playing games and stuff with your child. There's one game I'll pull out in a second where she says what's her trigger.
mm-hmm,
Actually, there were two,
mm-hmm,
but she's always been a storyteller.
mm-hmm.
I think kids. Actually, there's three games, and I think if kids are storytellers, a lot of them are in general.
Mm-hmm.
This hobby escalates that quickly,
Oh, sure. See,
where they can just tell stories, and then she quickly found out through you and your games that they don't have to be linear. And I think in RPG world, and I'm new at it, I think most people in general feel like they have to follow a book, a set of a story, a line, a linear. Like you have to go here, then here, then here.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think very quickly she wasn't tied to any of that. She was quickly being able to just make up a story in her mind.
Mm-hmm.
I will brag a little on your end. She's been blessed to have met you, where you run the stories in your brain on the fly, and that's her style now. That's what she's been doing, and
Mm-hmm.
she's been slowly starting a group at school,
Mm-hmm.
and she quickly put that off rail. She was supposed to follow a pre-written adventure that D&D wrote, and that went out the window by the second day. She no longer wanted to follow that preset that story.
Did she read through the whole thing? I wonder, or did she just because
She got through the first half. This thing was I forgot. It's Storm of the Tile, and I think it goes in like 3 sections in rough general. I read it roughly, so it's like you could do this, then you go here, and then you go here.
right.
And she quickly found out that her players were kind of wanting to do other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and she wasn't comfortable having them just go on rails. Like, okay, you guys have to go up the road here, going to these 3 places. Eventually, you'll meet somebody, and then that's how the story goes.
Right. All right.
And she quickly just said, you know what? Let's just take the training wheels off this thing, and let's just do whatever you guys want.
Gene, who's the youngest player that you've ever played with?
Actually, anybody who came to the table at the open gaming tables where my sister DM'd mostly, and then I would DM sometime to give her a break and a chance to play.
Yeah, but what was the age? What was the age bracket? What was the youngest player?
About 8.
Yeah.
About
It
8.
really, they really have to be able to at least read, right? It's
They have to be able to read.
They
They
have
have
to
to
look-
be able to sit there and listen and gather information in.
Mhm.
And there are some 8-year-olds that can do it. There are some 8-year-olds that can't.
I'm reminded of the 8-year-old that came to our table, and one of the things that I have mandated for a really long time is that if a child is under a certain age bracket, the parent has to be involved, because I don't want to be a babysitter. I don't want the table to become a replacement for an adult, so that we end up having to, wipe their nose, so to speak, and clean up after them, that kind of thing. That they need to be at least mature enough to do that. And so the bracket has always been 11 or younger has to bring somebody with them, just from the I mean, in America today, I am a 60-year-old dude, and if I'm sitting at a table and in comes an 8-year-old child, I am very reticent about being in that room by myself with them. Not from any standpoint of reality, but from the standpoint of optics. It just would be problematic. So I always try to make sure that there are adults there if there's somebody that young. But the youngest that you've game mastered for was around 8 years old. Was that with a parent? Was that with parental participation, or was that just a child who?
No, he
showed
was
up?
playing in another game, and it was more adult oriented.
Okay, so he was he was
And
already
the
a
young boy
veteran.
and he was over watching ours
Uh-huh.
because we were at some dynamic part of it with dragons flying around the air and
Mhm.
and, and battle going on, and So he was coming over and watching him, and it, he went over to his father and had his father come over and ask if she could play. And I said, okay, yes, because we actually let anybody in if you don't give them
Mm-hmm.
a start,
Mm-hmm.
and you can help try to mold them also into what's good role playing.
Well, I think that the concept of children and parents playing together is sort of essential from a different level. As a parent myself, when my kids were at home, the especially my son was very much desirous of being at the table with with my friends. You know, when you're a little kid, you want to do what dad's doing, and even at even at 3 and 4, he wanted to play with my Warhammer 40K miniatures, and you know, handle my intricate models that I spent hours building. Is like, maybe I need something else, and so I created Green Army Men rules for him and his buddies to play, so they were able to. And it was so funny to watch him out there with it. They have one of those chubby rulers they make, the tape measures they make for children, the really thick ones, and he's out there, measuring things in the backyard. He looked at me, of course, he's trying to emulate what he saw at our table. So he's got this very serious look on his face and his tongue sticking out the corner of his mouth as he's making this measurement and, getting it all. And I just remember that the interaction was amplified when he got affirmation in his speech, in his talking pattern with adults, because he was exerting his will in ways that most kids don't get an opportunity to do. Game masters are a unique situation, just like Melkor mentioned with Natalia. Her ability to become a storyteller came from her ability to be a good player with her dad at the table, and I think that one thing that we want to really kind of focus on today is that dynamic. I mean, I think it's really important to mention the fact that Melkor, when he came on at first, he was reticent. Let's be nice about it. He was like, I'm not playing. This is her game. I'm only down here because I need to supervise, but I'm not getting involved. I'm going to sit back and I'm just going to let this be her game. And within 2 or 3 weeks, it's not that he started off directly becoming involved in the game, although he didn't take long. But I do remember there were several weeks where she would do something in game, and we could watch Victor twist in the wind because he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
I remember, and it was like he put tape on his mouth,
pretty
you know,
pretty close.
metaphorically, yeah,
Pretty close.
metaphorically.
So, Melkor, what was that like being in the moment of knowing that she was acting and you were sitting there having to sit on your hands? I mean, you knew already that my rule was that if you interacted, you were hooked. You were in. But what was that like in those few episodes where she made a decision that might have been, by other interpretations, ill-advised?
I'm not. To be honest, I'm probably the one that makes the worst decisions. We probably saw this last night, but it's. I've been playing with her all the time, so it wasn't that hard for me to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I wanted to stay away.
Right.
It's just that I guess I don't know. I just eventually jumped in because I've always been interacting with my daughter since she's been playing games
Sure.
since basically
Yeah,
5 years old.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that you were being interfering anyway. But what I meant was you didn't get invested because of you did not get invested just because you were Natalia's dad. You got invested because you were listening to the story behind the story, and
You got it.
that
is it.
that's
That
what
was
I'm getting at, is
the-
that the reason you play with your daughter is that you're both playing. It's not that I'm the father and I must be involved because my daughter is. Not at all. You were completely hands off. Go do what you're going to do, and then you would hear something in the story and go, but we could do this. If we go this direction, we could find out that thing. And I think that's
it goes back to you, the story you've created. But more in general, what I wanted to kind of talk about is just the. Are you guys still there?
Yep, we're here.
Yeah.
You're loud and
Yeah,
clear.
it's the and Jean would probably. I had no idea she's been a teacher for far too long, 30 years. So
37.
you've seen a lot of interactions of parents and kids. What I wanted to basically get at is a lot of parents miss out by getting playing with their kids. By that I mean, let's just stay in the RPG world. You miss the moments when your child starts critical thinking. Uh, when they start getting involved in a character in the story, how would they want to go by it? Some people want to play the characters, the story, the mechanics.
Hmm.
Uh, this is one thing I've noticed, and a big. You have no idea how much I really try to push parents to stay to play with their kids. Might it be Pokemon, TCGs, trading card games, as dumb as they may sound,
Hmm.
RPGs, board games, because they can slowly get to see the switch of critical thinking. Like Gene was mentioning, I'd like kids to come in already knowing how to read. I've
Hmm.
noticed a lot of kids slowly, and I've noticed this just in the past less than a year, where I've seen kids slowly basically get the basic concepts of reading, and in like 3, 4, 5 months, in less than 6 months, they're already reading and analyzing.
Hmm.
And that's something that the story also.
Numbers too.
Yes.
Dice
Exactly.
are numbers,
Exactly.
and kids that have numbers, you can say, okay, you'll have 6 already here, and there's one more. What does one more than 6
Yep.
is? Well, you know your
It's not
number.
just it's not just that. It's not just that. It's like, what do you do with that number?
Right.
It's the critical. It's the critical thinking.
And practical application rather than just the numerics of it. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about all role play games is that they don't just take the numbers for granted, but they try to give you a context for the use. So, for example, the idea of the advancement and the understanding of doubling the number and cutting the number in half and getting a calculational awareness, I guess, for why computational awareness, so that you're aware of why you're doing the math. You know what the benefit of it is. So I went back. I mentioned before we came on the air to Victor that I have been including parents with their children in games going back to 1990. Was the first time that I recall having a child play. Now let me clarify. Before that, my own children played. My kids were born in the 80s. So by 90 something, now I'm including their friends and and everything. So that was one thing. And so GMing for a group of kids was not abnormal. But what was interesting is that my own long-term games became inclusive of parent-child relationships, starting with a player whose characters Gene actually has interacted with as avatars, and that is the player. The player's character was named Elmo, and his son played a character named Unferth. And Unferth was a spellcaster, a magi, and Elmo was a ranger. And this is using classic D&D. I think we were in second edition rules in this time frame, and they were parts of the Dogs of War. So the group name the players get used to, because I mention them quite often when we are dealing with the, as you said, the sliding scale of time. When we're talking about older events, I'll talk about the Dogs of War. But Elmo and Unferth was the way I met them was quite interesting. We were as a writer, I've been trying to find a way to break into the role playing marketplace forever, and I wrote my first article for Dragon magazine way back when I was 12. So in their first or second year, I had one of my articles was published. I can't even remember when that was, but they didn't publish my name or anything because I was a minor. So they put me in as a complimentary. It was like for their editorial, basically. So I didn't get a byline. They just published the article that I had provided them with. But the point is that I'd been trying forever to make it in the marketplace. So in, I believe it was 90, my games group decided we would write a module and voluntarily donate it to the local high school group. And so we created an adventure that got published by being a game that they ran at the Redlands High School for their spring tournament. And that was, what's that?
You still have that?
Do I still have that? Do I have the original
Yeah.
module? No.
I'm just very curious.
No, but I've got it memorized. Of course I do. But
So you do have it.
yeah, exactly. But actually, I did have until the fire. I had an article that was written by Mike Muckenfoos. I don't know why, but I absolutely remember his name. Mike Muckenfoos did an expose on our tournament because he was sent by the Redlands paper to cover the event, and so they were directed to come and talk with us. So imagine this: I'm in full garb because we've decided to play in our own tournament. We're not actually GMing. We're letting the high school kids run the event. It was a fundraiser for the school, and so we were the players. And so I'm in full garb as a magi. I've got my hair streaked gray on the sides, and I've got my wand, my big rod, and heavy cloak. And my other players, one of my players was he's about 5'6" and weighed close to 300 pounds and had a fake beard on. And he'd gone so far to buy the kind that has the spirit gum that holds it down, so it makes it look like his real beard. But he's got this real big bushy beard, and he's got my son's Viking helmet with the little horn sticking out the side, and he passed himself off as a dwarf for the party, and he's carrying around an ornamental axe that I had or whatever. Anyway, one of the things that happened is while we were being interviewed, one of the kids came up and asked to see the dwarf's axe, and instinctively he reached for the beard because little kids want to do that, just want to kind of touch, feel everything. So he touches Randy's beard and says, "So, how long have you been playing?" And Randy, right there with the audience, with the reporter right there, turns to the child and says, "Who's playing?" And just made the little kid's eyes went like saucers, like, "Oh man, this guy's." And so the interview went really well. They ironically, of course, they misspelled my name. It's only 5 letters long, and they still found a way to mess up the spelling. But I do remember it was. The irony is that the article was all about our fantasy genre role-playing thing, but the picture they put in there was a Star Trek Battlefleet game. So they had 2 of the Star Trek ships, but it was one of my first games. So as we're sitting there running, we just played in the session, so we're sitting afterwards, and this little kid comes out in a was clearly a Robin Hood outfit. He had the little pointy hat and his little sword strapped to his hip, and he came out and his dad introduced himself, and the boy was named Colin, and he handed me his sword, and quickly thinking this was only 2 years after it came out, I said, "Oh, I've never seen its equal," which is of course a quote from The Princess Bride. And the little boy's eyes got all big, and the father said, "Oh, so when do you guys play?" And so we started a relationship, and within 2 weeks, Colin Unferth and his father Elmo were playing in our game session. And the reason why I tell that story really has more to do with that was really the first time that I realized that a parent with a child is more of an asset than the child by themselves or the adult by themselves. It's important to realize that there's a dynamic between parent and child that makes the game experience for them more precious than it would be if it was just simply Victor sitting in the back and watching Natalia play.
Oh, we've seen that on at least a very small amount of games I played with you, mainly.
Mm-hmm.
It's we've noticed that quite a bit, actually. I think the reason I'm bringing this topic up is I've seen it, I think, more often than most people, where there'll be a parent and a child. We have one right now playing currently. We've had 2 or 3. I'm gonna say 4 or 5. Well, 2 actually right now. And I've noticed over just the past whatever I've been playing with you, a year or 2,
Mm-hmm.
God, 4, 5, 6 people have come in.
Well,
Father, daughter. One guy came in with father, daughter, child. They stuck around for a little bit, so I've seen it quite often, and to me, it's just very nice to see.
well, thank you. And I think the other thing to mention is that I believe we've had more than that, only because you may not realize we've had parent and child play that were both adult. So that's another side of this that most people don't think about, is that we're building a mechanism with Nikos being so easy to play that you can bring somebody who is older, who may never have role played in their lives, and give them the opportunity to, as Jean says, she exists on Earth and she lives on Nikos. The story itself is compelling, but the mechanism has to be simple, because if the mechanism is too difficult, you create such a high threshold that you cut off a certain percentage of the population, both above and below.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because that's exactly what's happening to my daughter running a group within just a month, where I'd hate to say this, and Gene will, it really has to back me up. A lot of these games have the rule set is too heavy for most people. When you simplify everything, we concentrate on story, and more people jump in. And I think that's what created here. That's what my daughter's slowly going with, and I think that's, I wouldn't say the future, but I think that's, I guess some people don't want to play the mechanics. So yes, you are correct. By making it easier to jump in, you keep a lot more people in. When you get mother, father, mother, son, whatever structure it is that's going to sit and play, usually more than likely the parent has never played games, or they've dabbled in very little. I've noticed they've dabbled in like TCGs, trading card games.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not used to a heavy rule set. So if you were to sit there and drop on them a 300 and something pound, page book, and it's like, this is the rule set here, they're pretty much gonna be out. But when you're sitting there and telling them, just sit down, we're just gonna talk, just play your character, give me what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Before you know it, they're in with the child. I've noticed a lot of people. I did it with my daughter, where we do, the combo, the team up type deal, which is even
Mm-hmm.
nicer.
Mm-hmm.
We go home. You almost know this. When I go home with my daughter, we're still talking about this. Oh, this is what happened. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Another thing. Go on.
I was gonna ask Gene, would you say that a child who has an engaged and interested parent does better in school, or is it a child who the teacher has to basically pay mom and dad to? Did we put Gene to sleep?
I think their mic went out.
Ah.
But yeah, I've noticed that too. I mean, my daughter, she's been reading. I honestly want to believe, and I've seen it, when this stuff happens with games,
Mm-hmm.
kids just do much better in school. They have less problems,
Mm-hmm.
which is another subject I kind of wanted to touch on.
Sure.
I don't know if you really want to touch it, but the social aspect, the speaking, a lot of people to this day, that's as small as it is, they have a problem public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
which creates, sadly enough, it does create problems later where they're not able to interact with people. We just had an incident just recently where, you have conflict, and if a person is not comfortable speaking,
Good point.
this thing they escalate, or it just becomes a problem that just escalates emotionally and mentally. But by then, what I'm trying to get at, by when you get kids in earlier, they start just getting up and speaking in public without even knowing it. Just
Right.
speaking with a group of 5, 6, 7, 10 people.
Well,
Next thing you know, it's like, yeah, you were public speaking. You were talking to 10 people that were paying attention.
I think one thing that doesn't get acknowledged enough is that I remember when I first started role playing, the people who were role players, because the rules were so arcane, were, for lack of a better term, the eggheads. We were the elites in the school. We were the smart alecks who knew everything and didn't have to worry about homework and stuff, because we had the subject on lock, so to speak. And there's been a radical change. There's been a radical change as they try to, quote, simplify the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. The whole switch to 3rd edition and flipping the combat charts and getting rid of THACO and all those identifiable linguistic priorities that made us a special group were basically wiped out. And the purpose for that from the marketing side was to sell more copies. Unfortunately, it also led to a perception change where they kept the idea of gamers are geeks, but they didn't actually foment that. They did not promote that. Instead, people who were regular Joes, so to speak, were embraced as role players, but there was no the elitism was taken out. And the challenge with that to me is that they have forgotten that really all of those people who were quote socially outcast who became role players automatically improved their ability at social interaction. So it wasn't that we were, standoffish and weird because we were smart, but it's that we became more socially adept by the very role play. Yes, we have conversations speaking in terms of something that happens in a fictional setting, but that doesn't make it any less powerful that a character like Bowden, that a player like Val can step to the table and carry on an entire presentation as if he was, the king of the castle, and everyone else at the table is going to applaud him because he is doing what is required in a role play game that doesn't happen in real life, and that is present your case, defend your position, have an attitude, and present that to others. And I think that's one of the areas where role play is the strongest, is that we give people those social skills that are, psychologically threatening. They can actually overcome them and become, as you say, a public speaker. And that's really, I think, critically important in this world today when our presentation skills are basically being sundered or thrown under the bus because you can't have that opinion in public. You can't say those things, and this at least gives you ability to have a voice.
Yes. I have to ask, and I don't know how to put it because I don't have these challenges, but I've noticed there's a lot of players, kids, that might have emotional problems. I don't know which ones there are. I do know that there's certain people use role-playing games to address that. That my daughter actually played in a lengthy campaign with a I think they used the word DM, a game master.
Mm-hmm.
That was he is a professional in his field, and he uses RPGs
Mm-hmm.
to help people with certain
Right.
problems.
That is a challenge. That's a challenge. It is true that many people who come to the table with an RPG may have those issues, but number one, the game master usually is completely blindsided because he doesn't know about it, and generally people are uncomfortable with it, and so I get it. It's a dangerous. Go ahead.
Sorry. What I'm meaning is, just I understand what you're coming from. What I'm getting at is something even better, where they're taking the role playing game as a tool.
Right. But I'm just walking the very clear line that as a game master, there is no, and maybe this is something we can also talk about, is that there is no regimentation or licensing process by which I am authorized or would even ever entertain the idea of being a therapist or an analysis resource for that purpose. Yes, there are people who have. Matter of fact, my good friend Dr. Mackey got her doctorate by actually validating that role-play games, in particular Dungeons and Dragons, supports a more healthy and more astute management mechanism. So yes, but I'm just wanting to clarify there has to be a line there where we say we are not capable or regimented enough to be associated with it. But you're right. People can self-medicate, so to speak, by utilizing RPGs.
It's like your friend did, which I heard this a few weeks ago in one of your episodes, and I actually want to know a lot more about that process. Where yes, you can take this hobby, and you use it, it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
We use it to storytell. We use it for entertainment. That's my goal here. In the meantime, when again we go back to the topic, parents come in. We use this tool, which is the role playing game, to
Right.
interact with your child, see how they're growing, see how they're framed, see how they're thinking. Talk about it later, push on it.
Right.
It's more like critical thinking. See how your child is thinking.
Right.
Why did you do these things?
Right.
I've actually just started noticing where we're switching. A lot of players are switching characters. Where all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden it's like I'm gonna play a totally different character. How does that person, that my son, my daughter, how do they start going by that? Do they start having some weird thinking and stuff where you might have to address that, or maybe you start seeing an inside of your child. Hey, my child now sees the world this way or that way. Uh, are you tracking? Are you following what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Where they decide to be like, okay, now I'm gonna play this character that's just gonna do
Well,
a lot of mean things, or a lot of good things, or maybe he wants to start being the problem solver, and all of a sudden you see
well, I think
making your child work.
I think that what we forgot to acknowledge with these kids, that adults learn what they call code switching pretty early. And that is, when we were children, we learned to code switch a lot. In other words, you go out in the playground and you were Captain Fantastic as the superhero band, or you were the colonel of the military, and it changed from literally from recess to recess. And so we learned to code switch and move into those different modes. I think our culture has done away with that almost completely. And the reason why we have so many people with what are called social issues really are people who didn't develop those code switching skills because they didn't play enough. They didn't engage in this kind of role, this kind of creative, imaginative thinking. And I think that one of the reasons why I was kind of focused on us making character switches at this point has to do with the fact that how long has those characters played together? When you started, you were Jiminy Cricket, and Giminy Cricket, and Giminy was a instrumental assistant. But pretty soon, they had you on your own missions, and you were doing your own thing because Natalia had grown up enough so that she could be her own person without you having to be her conscience. And that switching, that code switching, is important for kids to learn. And so the fact that it seems like we almost mandated it because this was the silly season where we've had everybody. And by the way, I just talked to Jean, and she lost her microphone. Her headphones stopped working. So that's how we lost her. But I think that it's important to state that there is a necessity for role players, especially young ones, to play many characters.
I never thought about that. I've never heard the term code switch. I actually wrote it down. I never.
Yeah, there's a very famous.
You're absolutely correct.
I can't remember the author's name, but there is a very famous book about MPDD where they're dealing with the people who have difficulties with differentiating their personalities, and then they become stuck. The idea of the person with multiple personalities or whatever.
It's a way for kids to say, I want to play this. I never thought about it that, but you're correct. I'm a child of the '80s. I played in a playground. I got dirty. We had the merry-go-round. We got hurt.
Right. And
you're right. At one point we're playing G.I. Joes, and I'm this guy, and the other one you're playing Hot Wheels.
Right.
You're absolutely correct.
And I think that the issue too is that our world has erased code switching when it talks about playing, because video games allow the person to sit down and we're probably going to catch fire. I'll be honest. In the fact that our videos are growing, we would probably catch 1 or 2 or 10 people who come from the standpoint of video games are equivalent. And so I'm going to catch some fire for this. But the reality is that video game players are always in the third chair. They're always sitting above and behind the persona of the character. And in that perspective, their code never has to change. The characters can swap out underneath them and move around and switch from this kind of a setting to that kind of a setting. But the player never has to change. And that's where role playing is essential, because when you are role playing in a live setting with other people at the table, you are becoming, if you will, that persona to some extent. and therefore you have to learn to switch code from. In our game, we talk about being in tomato. Remember, we talk about the idea of going in the meta and stepping away from the table and recognizing those are two different things. But by doing so, allowing us to re-merge back into the time stream of the session, and so the players, the children who are playing, are learning that code switching mechanism so they can literally put their foot on the gas and the clutch at the same time, so to speak, and ease themselves into those roles, which allow them to understand how to do so. Now, am I making the theory that, or am I making the projection that somehow I'm fixing MPDD or I'm fixing identity? No, I'm not. I'm not trying to go into DID or anything like that. Instead, what I'm saying is that my player experience as a game master has been that people are better at code switching when they play a role-playing game. They're just simply able to differentiate between those personalities more clearly.
Yeah, that's, you know what? After whatever we've been talking, I think that's what it came down to. The subject here to be code switching.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely correct, and that's what it is. They're able to change. Again, we go back to the parent-daughter. They're able to see the different play styles because that's what kids want, and that's yes. And by creating, again, we go back to your world where it's the theater of the mind,
Mm-hmm.
which I do like the fancy toys and everything. We've discussed this ad nauseum and at length here, but at some point, it's like I'd rather, in my mind, like last night, in my mind, see what the hallway looks like, when those two characters look like, what that door looks like, instead of, like you mentioned, when you're on rails, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, this is what it looks like, that's the graphic, that's you don't get to imagine anything, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
That's what the door looks like.
Well, I think that's also, this is a place for me to put another blatant plug, and that is the Saturday Roleplay Roulette. It does that on steroids because not only are the players switching characters week over week, but you're also changing genres. You're changing the very complexity of the visuals. And I've jokingly said that Nikos is really the most sophisticated of computer games out there because you're using Super HD because it's what you created in your mind. Now, that can only be true if the player has developed the concept of visualization. And I know that there is a certain percentage, I think it's almost 10% of the world that can't visualize. But I've had players who literally were of that mindset who still said they would rather play theater of the mind than a tabletop game because even if they can't visualize, they can internalize. They get to feel the emotion of being in that space, even if they don't see the monster, so to speak, reaching out for them. They can at least understand the gravity and the intensity of the scene in ways that people who even those people who do visualize don't necessarily get if they already have in their mindset what the monster looks like.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I think, code switching, I think what I got out of this, I think what everybody should be getting out of this is we kind of lost that. We lost the ability to play in the playground, and RPGs playing the playground to us in indoors.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. The very concept of playgrounds is the mechanism of playing NycosRPG without the NycosRPG. In other words, when you are playing in just the fiction of a setting without any rules at all, you still have to, if essentially you have a storyteller or a game master only to adjudicate, yes, Tommy, you got shot. Yes, you have to sit down for a second, Whereas in the old Cowboys and Indians days, yeah, I shot you. No, you didn't. I shot you. No, you didn't. That was a mechanic that really bugged everybody that played outside. It's like, come on, we have to have some rule of parity between roles. And the ability in an RPG to have somebody as the game master really does moderate that and therefore mitigate that problem. I knew we're coming up on our we're 40 minutes. We still got time. I was going to say one thing to talk about when you talk about this issue that you mentioned most clearly of code switching. I want to go one step a little aside from that, and that is I wanted you to tell a little bit about your daughter's experience when she first was role playing, because you said that she was I mean, not role playing, but game mastering. There's Jean. She's on her phone. You're very tiny, Jean. Can barely hear you, but you're there. She's poking us. Stop poking me, Jean. And she's poking at me again. We can't hear you. Sorry. No sound at all, Jean. Anyway, the point I was trying to make is that when Natalia first started, you said that she was fundamentally being not forced but guided to run another person's material. What did she say was? I remember the comment you made, but I can't remember exactly how you said it. And why did you kind of repeat it? The concept when she decided to switch from a city in the world that they had provided her with to running something that was more that quote. Can you remember that story?
1 second before we go, that I wanted to just give. It's just dumb. It's a junk game. It's not very good a game, to be honest. But this game right here, it's got the dungeons. It's got the IP.
Uh-huh.
I posted this on my channel and stuff like that. This is the game basically that started it all. It's super simple. You just move one square and you fight. You draw a card and you fight.
Okay.
Very quickly, did my daughter turn that into, let's make that move a little longer, more thematic. Something might happen in between the move of the miniature. God, you should have 1,000 miniatures here.
Mm-hmm.
Something will happen from here to here.
Right.
And then once we get here, we're gonna describe the battle instead of flipping a card, rolling a dice, and see if we got an 18 plus or whatever it is on this game. It's been a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's describe the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course after a few times playing that, which is a praise to that game, you bet about board games that you can play a board game more than 3 times to such success. And you start house ruling.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically the spark for her to go into storytelling. Now going back to your story, yes, what made the switch it's very easy actually. She was playing at the school, which I was surprised that her school has a Dungeons and Dragons group.
Mm-hmm.
It's big enough to have 2 people, 2 tables, which I was even shocked to hear. At one point, her good teacher, she has a very, very good teacher she's very close with. She runs one table, which is running a straight module, just very linear.
Mm-hmm.
She was tasked to run the same thing, just to keep them like the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty funny because at one point she did mention to me when I picked her up from school that her teacher all of a sudden was like leaning over like this because she wasn't hearing your normal, okay, we're not here in this type of world. What is Eldrasar? What is Nycos? And what she did was she got very tired of the linear story.
Mm-hmm.
She's never been good at that, I guess. And she slowly switched to your world only because she played in your world for about a year, and these things became familiar to her. And by that I mean became familiar with her because the way you create the world, you're able to bless players with, not every player, which is a good thing, with leaving marks in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And we could do a whole different video on that, and we've done it before, and I would love to talk about that.
Sure.
But and then by you doing that, it gave somebody power. It gives people, as a matter of fact, I'm seeing it, I don't want to name names here, but I'm seeing it with another younger player we play with, where they have power to put marks in something. I know it's fake, I know it's fictitious, it's in our mind, but again, what it's like, it's a this physical thing or is it in here?
Mm-hmm.
So they're able to lay a mark. This is what I laid here.
Mm-hmm.
Dean, for example, she's done it multiple times, which I find extremely fascinating. But that's what happened. By her leaving that mark there, she became part of this world, which she wants to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
And she's slowly bringing it in.
On.
Okay, well, we got you back again for a second. Anyway, there was a question that Victor asked Jean. When you and I was the one that asked the question, but when you were a teacher, do you find that the children that have parents that are actively involved in their lives are better students, or are more, or are the children whose parents stay away better students? And we lost her already. There we go. Batting 1,000. Sorry,
A
Gene.
37-year experience. I wanted that.
We'll wait for bated breath till another episode when her headsets are working. But no, I think you're absolutely correct about the connection between the character and the person. I believe one of the most effective tools, and I think that Nycos bears this out, is that if you reward good player behavior by legacy, where what they do makes a difference and makes a change in the world, that is something that absolutely should be promoted, and that the players are rewarded by doing so. Because how many of us in our lives would love to change the world, would love to make a difference, and can't? You know, there are so many human beings and so many people that do the jobs that we do on the world that it's very hard for what we accomplish to become important. We can't effectively change the world. So when we play in a fantasy setting, we want to at least be able to accomplish that. And if we don't have that capacity, we won't. And I guess in some ways, to me, it's really the essence of role play to be able to create in the minds of the players the very concept of hope. You know, that you're giving them a place where they matter. And
you create a place where just gonna I hate to say this, foot switching again, where kids are able to just run around. Let's go here. Let's go there. Again, it goes back to a lot of these pre-written adventures. There's 1,000 and a million out there, where I don't see Mary Ann's character. Mary Ann's character is gonna do this in this world, and we're gonna follow it. Well, I don't want to bring franchises in, but franchise A doesn't want to. They don't write it in. Who's Mary Ann? Who's that character?
Yeah, well, there are manufacturers who do try this, and ironically, I believe that we had some major influence on it without breaking any IPs. Let's just say there is a second rank card game company. I won't specify which one, but that company came to me and wanted to see how I did the role-playing legacy, because what they were looking for is they wanted to make it so that their game's property would be, and it's now a branded thing, a living card game. They wanted their legacy year over year to be influenced by the way the players at their tournaments acted. So therefore, if a certain deck type won, they wanted the next year for that deck type's theme to then be improved so that other players would see they want to use that because it was working effectively. And therefore, the very ebb and flow of their story world was affected by their players. And that came directly from me doing presentations for that company a year, maybe 2 years before they ever did it in reality. But the point was that this idea of characters becoming avatar and avatar influencing the game, and you only take the good and right and righteous from the game world and you make those your new avatars, so therefore you're promoting the direction you want the world to go in without the you must follow this line thought processes of the railroads.
I get that, but you're still back into my frame of thinking is you're still back into, now you're printing a physical card, a physical book. You're printing something where it's highly limited instead of taking, which is, we're kind of switching away from the cow topic here after almost an hour, but where you're taking your world and it's like, I'm selling you this, and you can put it in your house, you put it in your house, you put it in your house, and you run your own Nycos, you run your own sandbox.
Well, okay, so when
you physically print something, I think, and it's like, this character here, it's canon in this game, so, but I want to have, but on my game, I want to have Marianne. On my game, I want to have Landro. On my game, I want to have, whatever.
So let me let me bring it back, because you're right. That seemed like a far stretch away from the parent-child thing. But my reason for doing that, to talk about that, is that culturally, we have eliminated hope in a lot of places in our lives. And so by giving back to you and Natalia the conversation that you have leaving the game afterwards, then that's where the influence of those long-term things. You remember when she met with, when you as a character met with the Dogs of War in a scene or two in one of the iterations where you had switched in timelines and were in a different framework where you actually interacted with them. And I guarantee that the night that you went home from that game would be one that you would have a conversation by. So why does that Klondike Stormfist matter to the story, and how did that person get involved in our lives, and whatever. And so therefore, I'm not printing a card that says you must use Klondike Stormfist for this. What I'm doing instead is I'm giving you the very concept that the player who played that character had when he played that role. And I think that's where the legacy comes from, is that yes, I can add my 2 cents to the world, but to do that, I have to be morally right. I have to be enjoined. I have to be involved in the story. Otherwise, I won't. Yes.
Right. And again, and this is when this is the selling point to the game. When somebody else buys it, saying Wisconsin, they're not gonna play with you. Nobody's that lucky. So they're gonna run their own world over there.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna run their own theater of the mind. They're gonna run their own characters, and with the idea and hopes that they're going to set those characters to be able, hopefully, when they're reading the rules set in the book, that you can create characters for your lengthy story. I mean, this is a game it's a lifestyle game. That's another great way to put it. This is a lifestyle game where you can play it forever. Jean, Marianne, right here next to me on the screen, she's a prime 100% example. It's a lifestyle game. And for you to get that, oh my God, I think companies would pay billions to be able to be in somebody's house for 20-something years, however Marianne's been playing 50-something years. You know what I mean? It's like Coca-Cola would pay a ton of money for you to be a forever client for 50 years. And for somebody to play a specific game, a specific rule set, a specific franchise, I think that's just amazing. To play it for so long. So to be able to put in everybody's house and say, you can do this, you can set up this. You had a great conversation, I think yesterday or a day ago, about NPCs. NPCs, I think you're 100% correct. NPCs are just throwaway for a lot of people. That's what my daughter, that's actually another, we can go back into that topic, where on this story, they're supposed to be specific NPCs. Their goal is just to get you to go down that hallway. Oh, I'm just here to say hi, how you doing? You can buy this for 5 gold. And by the way, you should go down to the third dungeon, the third
doorway.
The third doorway, the third dungeon, the third stage. That was it. They're throwaway. Was a person. But you can create. That's actually kind of part of the hook too, where she wanted to create that character that was saying that to be a little more like, oh, maybe this is somebody that they'll meet later on. How do you do that?
Yep.
This is a topic we talk about off topic. How do you create that?
Well, I think
your subject on NPCs needs to be bigger, where it's like that NPC doesn't have to be just like one guy. You can meet that guy here. Take notes, put it in here, however you want to do it.
Well, sure, and I think this is really where one of the things that I have found for myself that is instrumental is the understanding of a sliding scale. That metaphysically, every pattern has inherent chaos, and in all chaos there is a pattern. And so having the player perspective changing scale, and therefore changing the level of interaction as you move through a story, is how you're able to personalize it and anchor the player into that world, because it is no longer really the piece of paper that is the character sheet that matters, but it's the perspective of the player and how they are interacting with the world, so that as long as you as a storyteller can keep that scale in focus as you adjust it, so that when the players meet with the big bad, they are already have a reverential understanding that this is more impactful. Then you don't have the for lack of a better term, the Leroy Jenkins, the player that just loses it and goes wah, because the gravity of the situation is recognizable. And I think that's really one of the essentials that comes from NycosRPG that you don't see in the other mechanisms, because they are not able to change scale. If they've built it to be a level 1 adventure, then they've capped out the power and the toughness and the intuitiveness and creativity of the villains so flatly that they are, as a friend of mine would call them, polished turds. They're very shiny, very professional, and very useless.
But they're just one. Yeah, they're just one dimension. They're just here to do that one.
Exactly.
One thing I wanted to talk about, I guess we could have talked more about NPCs. I just realized this, what you were just talking. You can use NPCs to help people to create moral choices. You can throw an NPC, which I'm sure you've done a few times, where
What?
and again it goes to
Nycos adjusts people's morals?
so it
Careful.
goes to the thing when you have a parent structure there, you can kind of see, okay, and you can build this in your own game. You can use this game to test your child to see where they're going, what their frame of thinking is without asking. It's hard to ask a kid, hey, what do you think about this or that? But if you take an NPC and slowly put a twist on it, it's like, yeah, this guy's asking you to do. So we saw some of that yesterday. We'll talk off topic, where you're asking this character, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And all of a sudden they're like, we're gonna do this, and it's like, whoa, I didn't think my child would do that. That starts like, okay, this is where my child is thinking, good or bad. It's usually never a good or bad thing. It's more like this is where their thinking is. You can see that if you're sitting next to your child, but if you're sitting outside on your phone, not interacting with your child, you don't know what just happened in there. It's like, hey, your child is a little doing this or that, or hey, your child, I feel like he's very helpful. He just, for weeks here, he just wants to go out of his way, and this is your kid. And when parents miss out on that, they don't see that because they're outside. And a stranger such as yourself or even the other players there, they have more of an insight of that child, where it's like, wow, that kid, that's his, that's what he believes. That's what he's thinking. You miss all that.
There's a challenge with that. I have to again back to being simply protective of the mechanism. There are no ways to know what people are going to do in the real life, no matter what you know about them in the character life. I have to give an example of somebody that played with us at another store in Southern California. I don't want to go into the specifics, but this young man was 19 years old, very optimistic, very hopeful, was talking about going in the military, blah, blah, blah. And he'd been playing with us for several weeks and seemed like a perfect match. As a matter of fact, he had asked whether I would be able to endorse him as a game master for the store. And I said, well, based on your play style, I would definitely be able to do that. Then 2 days later, I was told by his brother, I'm sorry, this player can't come back anymore. He won't be coming back to the store for a while. And I said, why? And he gave me a news channel and a broadcast from a website wherein that young man, was caught walking through a person's house without any clothes on that he'd broken into, and then went and gratified himself in a little girl's room. There was no way any person sitting at any of my tables would have ever seen that. And so I want to make it clear that, yes, we get to see some insight into people's minds, but we do not get to see that person no matter what.
No, I get that.
And I just want to clarify that it's not like I'm a prognosticator and can read the future or anything, or that the mechanism provides any of that kind of oversight. So just wanted
I get that. What I was basically at is at a way smaller scale when you have an 8, 9, 10,
right.
Like we were talking earlier, where it's like 11-ish. Parents could start kind of seeing.
Sure.
I'm not pointing out here. I'm not pointing out these behaviors. Oh, this kid's gonna be this horrible person or this great person.
Right.
But just where your kid is at now thinking.
Oh no, you're right. No, you're exactly right.
I just noticed this already.
I just need to put that. I just need to put that caveat in there.
Nobody's gonna be like that, but you can kind of start seeing, my child is a very helpful person, because she seems to play for the past year where her character is constantly just wants to help, or one that just wants to constantly destroy things. you can kind of start seeing where your child. I don't mean that's what it's gonna be, but if you're sitting there as a parent,
Right.
you can kind of like, okay, this is where my child's at. This is. It's like when you're playing GI Joes and stuff, where parents used to go in the playground.
Right.
They used to sit out in the chair, in the metal chair, and watch their kid. Some kids want to sit there and play with the toddlers, and you can kind of see, oh, they're very helpful. Some kids are over there pushing the other one around. It's like, okay, well, my kid's over there being a little violent, a little pushy. That's You get to see that. I'm not saying that's good or bad or you fix it, but you get to see that. You get to see this.
Right.
You get to see maybe they just play all by themselves. Everybody's over here, but they're over there. You're able to see that.
I got
And
you.
by you not being present with your child, you miss all that. And it goes back to when parent structures are there, it helps. At least in the RPG universe, I've talked about extensively on my other channels about just board games in general over other aspects. But in the RPG, I've noticed just recently that it does give you, I think, a bigger tool.
Well,
I understand we can play a lot of these heavy euros, and your kids can analyze, oh, if I do this, I can get this, and that gets me this. And it's like, okay, my child start critical thinking,
right.
but I'm not seeing behavior on.
Well, I think
Europe.
what role play really affords us, and I think maybe the most understated portion of role play, is that we can talk about very sophisticated adult issues without using terminology that would offend or draw any complaints. In other words, we have, as you know, there are situations in Nikos where there is very overt racism against actual species in game, and we can talk about that in game, and the players make their critical analysis of how that works for them. I mean, how that works against them, and therefore.
That's a whole different subject I would actually like to talk about too. But in short, what I have to say about that falls into the person running the game.
Right.
To the point, it's their touchy subject. To me, I'm not. I'm a whole different beast than most people.
Mm-hmm.
But I've noticed just recently I've had some incidents, and I've noticed that. Well, what I'm going to say is, when you bring those things in, you're bringing in. I wouldn't say problems. It's just sometimes you have to keep stuff on rails.
Oh yeah.
Know your audience. I don't ever want to put my daughter in a room where certain topics are being talked about.
Oh yeah. Well, no, that goes back to that goes back to game mastering for kids. Yeah, that's an entire subject. You're right.
Yeah, I don't need that. I understand. I don't want to go into the weeds, but I understand some people just want to have these weird things. We just had this recent. I don't know if you noticed. And I've noticed, and it's like, okay, you guys kind of, the store is a big. I don't want to talk too much about the store. They do very well with that, where you guys want to do these topics, either keep it over here, and I've had it before. You haven't been out there where it's like, I need the door closed. I don't have a problem. I don't work here, but some of this stuff is like, you guys might want to do this in your house. It's like there's certain things with kids. It's like I need.
Well, that
you know where I'm coming.
Yeah, that's why I said therein is a whole subject. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a healthy thing. We're just playing. We don't need to go into the weeds over here.
That's true.
Understand language gets in the way a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's up to the person running the game to say, hey, this is my audience. I know we'll talk about this off topic again many times, but it's like, know your audience. Don't make anybody feel uncomfortable, because
right.
I'm telling you right now, it takes a long time to build a customer, and you can lose one in a split second. I've seen it way too often lately, and it's like you're not getting that back for a long, if ever.
Right. So, and anyway, we are at an hour and 8, so we probably should take a break, and we will do this again at a later time. Watch tonight at 11 p.m. because the Nikos news is going to get crazy. There's a lot of new information that's going to be hitting the channel.
What's happening down south?
That's it. Well, no, we still can't know what's going on down south. It's the over here part. Over here part. Yes. Went in the wrong direction. That side. Yeah. Up in the top.
I got a group that went down south. You got another group that decided to go, I think, up the west side, up the west coast.
Yep. So we will cover those things in detail tonight at 11 p.m. We're on Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Marianne. Even though your phone has been out for the most of the day, we greatly appreciate your efforts to be here and to be part of the conversation. And we will catch all of you on the next episode of NycosRPG. See you later.